Hello everyone, Ace here, and today let's talk about Assassin's Creed Shadows, the recently revealed latest entry of the Assassin's Creed franchise, which is seeing its trailer get very thoroughly ratioed, and seeing a massive controversy surrounding the fact that Yasuke has been revealed as one of the two main playable characters. I don't, however, believe that this description is providing a sufficient explanation as to what exactly is going on, because this controversy is, let's face it, about a full decade in the making at this point. The Yasuke controversy is ultimately the result of a decade worth of progressives forcefully inserting their politics into pieces of media, with the admitted goal of turning them into pieces of Marxist propaganda, as outlined by far-leftist academic literature such as Empire and Games of Empire. The Yasuke controversy, therefore, is ultimately a situation that the far left have diligently brought upon themselves for many years. Or to put it another way, nobody would have cared had this game or this trailer came out 20 years ago, before the entertainment industry decided to commit mass seppuku through DIE initiatives. In fact, as perhaps a bit of a hot take, I will admit that had this game and trailer came out in the culture of 2004, I would have at least been somewhat curious about it, and more optimistic instead of pessimistic. But that of course assumes that the game was made by the kinds of developers that were around back in 2004, with the kind of game design that was understood back in 2004, and with the kind of characters that existed back in 2004, as in actual characters rather than what we get today, which by contrast could be more accurately described as caricatures, i.e. walking, talking stereotypes, which exist for no other reason than a checkmark. Because the narrow-minded scumbags who create such caricatures in the name of diversity are also the same kinds of people who will unironically think that black people are all orcs from D&D, and force Wizards of the Coast to change the description of orcs, before immediately moving on to also argue that Jewish people are all Skaven from Warhammer Fantasy, and that Slanesh is an example of trans representation done right. Yes, these are all things that far leftists unironically believe. The same far leftists that think you're racist for not liking the checkmark caricatures that they inevitably create. And as I've said before, I do not believe that Yasuke, the historical figure, is the problem at all here. It's the fact that absolutely everyone knows the reason why he was chosen as a main character by Ubisoft, as well as ultimately what it means when the people in charge of creating the game all have pronouns in their Twitter bios. We know Yasuke exists as nothing more than a checkmark to these people, as another caricature with the most stereotypical depictions possible from a person that thinks that black people are all orcs. We also know that the game is going to be pushing your typical far leftist agenda, with the forceful insertion of politics where they won't belong, resulting in a much noticeable degradation in the quality of writing and perhaps even gameplay as well. We know that the people that are going to be in charge of this project aren't going to be in charge of it because of their actual merits, but instead because they have the right politics, which will further still decrease the quality of the game overall. We also know that this means that the game will be buggy at launch, possibly even completely unplayable, to the degree that a decade ago a publisher would be absolutely sued over. We know that the game is going to be completely overpriced, to the tune of costing $130 for the actual game, and $70 if you want the privilege of playing an empty husk of a glorified demo, which, legally speaking, by the way, you won't actually own despite having bought. We also know we're going to be completely browbeaten by game journalists, busy trying to tell you how morally virtuous and superior they are to everyone else, despite the fact that in reality the world will be a far more moral and better place once these game journalists all end up getting their own businesses shut down and they end up homeless and starving to death in the streets like they all fucking deserve. We also know that there will be some very real attempts to rewrite history, as after all, the people who believe everything is political and propaganda will, by extension, create any piece of media with that specific goal in mind. We know all these things because we've seen all of these things. In some cases, we've had a full decade decade to see how these various pieces of the puzzle fit together, and we've had numerous examples of what can be described as Assassin's Creed Shadows play out. Admittedly, the game may have been named something different and the publisher different, but the end result is going to be exactly the same. And of course, video games are far from the only media where this exact scenario has played out numerous times. We have seen it in movies, we have seen it in TV shows, we have seen it in comic books, we have seen it in regular books, we have seen it in documentaries, we have seen it in music, we have seen it in the education system, we have seen it in food, we have seen it in alcohol, we have seen it in sports, we have seen it in clothes, we have seen it in retail stores. There is not an aspect of society that hasn't been negatively impacted via wokeness at this point. The far left have succeeded in making normies extinct at this stage, because to be a normie you'd have to be completely divorced from society altogether in order to ignore all the forced politics, and at that point you're not a normie anyways. So once again, it should come as absolutely zero surprise that the general public is showing their disdain at the absolute state of things. This does, however, lead me quite cleanly to one thing that has changed over the years, that being that the tide is of course starting to turn in this culture war. The capacity of the far left to cancel people has increasingly diminished over these years. And not only that, but it does appear that the establishment is finally starting to distance themselves from the far left, with a few companies seemingly starting to get rid of DIE initiatives, as well as of course the massive backlash that the far left have received over some of their latest hot takes that even the establishment can't ignore. Hot takes involving the latest military adventure in the Middle East, which I don't believe I need to focus too much on in this video as that is getting off on a tangent. It is, however, one of those topics that I believe is going to have far-reaching ramifications for how the far left is viewed and dealt with from here on out. I do believe, like I said, that the tide is starting to turn in this culture war, and the conditions that have unfortunately made Assassin's Creed Shadows what it is are conditions that have a very finite lifespan at this stage. This does, however, lead to the question of how long till things get properly repaired once the culture war is finally over. And to that, I will say that I do have some concerns because the far left have done a significant amount of damage to our society. After a full decade's worth of various attacks on various Western cultures, it's not difficult to see why some people can be a little bit on the trigger-happy side. Still, I nevertheless believe there is a great deal to be optimistic about in the end. I believe that the closure of the culture wars will be the beginning of a new golden age in society, an age that will offer more opportunities for those who are inherently meritocratic in nature. I suspect it'll be the perfect opportunity for new blood to take over the entertainment industry through their sheer skill, and we can once again get movies, games, and comic books that are actually worth buying. But getting back to the original topic, the problem in my eyes is not Yasuke as a character, nor is it Yasuke as a historical figure. It is the politicization of the entertainment industry as a whole, and the full decade worth of propagandization that we have all been put through. But ultimately, I am still optimistic about the future. Not for Assassin's Creed Shadows itself, but the future as a whole. And I look forward to the day where I no longer have to worry about whether or not any piece of media I buy is trying to indoctrinate me. And I trust that this is a future that you look forward to as well. But in any case, this has been Ace. Hope to see you guys again soon. Take care. Ace out.